Across the vast expanse of space, where 1,000 different species have risen and fallen, where empires span entire star systems and wars rage for centuries, there exists one truth that every alien civilization has come to understand. When the darkness comes calling and extinction knocks at your door, there is only one species you want standing beside you in that final hour. They call themselves humans, and they are the strangest warriors the galaxy has ever known. They don't possess the strongest bodies, the most advanced technology, or the longest lifespans. What they have is something far more dangerous. Something that has turned the tide of cosmic wars and saved countless civilizations from annihilation. They have hope when hope should be dead. They have courage when courage should be impossible. And most terrifying of all, they have this inexplicable ability to look at impossible odds and whisper two simple words that make even the mightiest predators in space tremble. Hold on. This is not the story of how humans conquered the galaxy. This is the story of how they saved it, one impossible battle at a time, and why every species that has ever fought beside them considers it the highest honor they could ever receive. The darkness is coming again. And somewhere in the void, a human ship is changing course to meet it head-on, because that's what humans do. They run toward the fire when everyone else runs away, and somehow, impossibly, they find a way to win. Welcome to the war that will determine if hope itself survives in this galaxy. Commander Zarathak's forearms trembled as she watched the tactical display. The Void Swarm had consumed 17 systems in 6 months, leaving nothing but dead worlds and empty space where thriving civilizations once existed. Now they were here, at Kepler Station, humanity's outermost research facility, and she was about to witness the end of everything she had ever known. The station shook violently as another wave of void ships struck the shields. Zarathak, a veteran Kytherian warrior who had seen 3 galactic wars, had never felt fear like this. The Void Swarm wasn't just another enemy. They were extinction-given form, consuming entire planets and turning living worlds into barren husks within days. "Commander, the evacuation ships are ready," reported Lieutenant Hawkins, the human communications officer. His voice remained steady despite the chaos around them. Zarathak marveled at this strange human trait, their ability to remain calm when death was inevitable. "Good. Signal the fleet to retreat to the Arcturus defense line," Zarathak ordered, her mandibles clicking with nervous energy. "We'll buy them as much time as possible before—" "Before what, Commander?" The voice belonged to Captain Marcus Chen, the human military advisor assigned to Kepler Station. He stood in the doorway of the command center, his dark eyes scanning the tactical displays with practiced efficiency. Unlike everyone else on the bridge, he didn't look defeated. "Before we all die, Captain," Zarathak replied bluntly. The Kytherians had no patience for false optimism. "The Void Swarm has never been stopped. Every species that has tried to fight them has been consumed." Unquote. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "That's true, but they've never fought humans before." The statement was so absurd that Zarathak's secondary arms flexed in what humans had learned was the Kytherian equivalent of shocked laughter. "Captain Chen, with respect, your species joined the Galactic Council only 50 years ago. You have 12 colonies and perhaps 100 warships. The Zephyrian Empire had 10,000 systems and 1,000,000 ships, and the Void Swarm consumed them in 2 months. "Numbers don't always tell the whole story," Marcus replied, moving to the central console. His fingers danced across the holographic interface, bringing up detailed scans of the approaching Void fleet. "Lieutenant Hawkins, get me a direct line to every human vessel in this system." "Sir, we only have 3 ships here," Hawkins replied. "The destroyer UES Defiant, the research vessel Galileo, and the supply transport Henderson." 3 ships, Zarathak whispered. "Against 10,000 void creatures." Marcus activated the comm system. "This is Captain Chen to all human vessels. I'm transmitting tactical data now. You'll notice the void ships have a weakness. They rely on collective coordination through electromagnetic pulses. If we can disrupt that coordination, we die slightly slower," interrupted Dr. Chiru. Veltar, the station's Andromedan science officer. His grey skin had turned almost white with fear. "Captain, I've studied the Void Swarm for decades. They adapt to every strategy. They've consumed species far more advanced than any of us." "Maybe," Marcus conceded, "but they've never adapted to human strategy." The station shuddered again, and warning lights bathed the command center in red. Through the massive viewports, they could see the Void fleet approaching, a writhing mass of black ships that seemed to absorb light itself. Each vessel was different, as if the swarm had consumed the technology of countless species and merged it into nightmare configurations. All stations report critical damage, announced Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, another human crew member. Shield generators are at 15%. We have maybe 10 minutes before they breach the hull. Zarathak closed her eyes, preparing to send the final evacuation order. When she opened them, she saw Marcus Chen smiling. Actually smiling. "Captain, perhaps you haven't fully grasped the situation," she began. "Oh, I understand perfectly," Marcus replied. "We're outnumbered, outgunned, and everyone expects us to die. These are actually ideal conditions for a human battle plan." Before anyone could respond, Marcus activated the general comm system. "This is Captain Marcus Chen to all personnel on Kepler Station and all Allied vessels. In approximately 8 minutes, the Void Swarm is going to breach our defenses and attempt to consume this station and everyone on it." The command center fell silent. Even the Void Swarm's attacks seemed to pause, as if the universe itself was listening. "I want everyone to understand something," Marcus continued. "Yes, we're outnumbered. Yes, they're stronger. And yes, every other species they've fought has been consumed. But they've made one critical error in their calculations." He paused, and Zarathak could hear crew members across the station holding their breath. "They decided to threaten our friends. And if there's one thing humans have never been good at, it's watching our friends get hurt without doing something about it." The UES Defiance captain, Sarah Liu, came over the comm. "What are your orders, Marcus?" "Simple. We're going to do what humans do best. We're going to take an impossible situation and make it everyone else's problem." Marcus began outlining his plan, and as he spoke, Zarathak felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. It was a ridiculous plan, requiring precise timing, incredible luck, and a level of coordination that should have been impossible with only 3 ships. But as she watched Marcus work, as she listened to the human crew members respond with enthusiasm rather than fear, she began to understand something that the rest of the galaxy was only starting to learn. Humans didn't calculate odds the way other species did. They didn't measure victory in terms of survival percentages or resource advantages. They measured victory in terms of whether their friends would be safe when the fighting was done. The station's shields failed completely, and void ships began their final approach. But instead of despair, Zarathak felt her warrior spirit rekindle for the first time in months. She was about to fight alongside humans, and she was beginning to suspect that the Void Swarm had no idea what they were up against. "All right, everyone," Marcus announced. "Remember, we're not trying to win this fight. We're just trying to make sure that when the history books are written, they'll say that Kepler Station didn't go quietly into the dark. We're going to make some noise." As the first void creatures began breaching the station's hull, Zarathak gripped her plasma rifle and took position beside Marcus Chen. Win or lose, she was about to discover why every species that had ever fought alongside humans considered it the highest honor in the galaxy. The battle for Kepler Station was about to begin, and the humans were smiling. In that moment, despite everything she knew about odds and probability and the Void Swarm's perfect record of victory, Zarathak found herself believing that maybe, just maybe, extinction was about to meet its match. Because humans, she was learning, had this strange habit of rewriting the rules when the rules said their friends had to die. And today, the rules were about to get a very rude awakening. The first wave of void creatures poured through the breached hull like liquid nightmare. Each one was different, a grotesque fusion of organic tissue and stolen technology from species the swarm had consumed. Zarathak had seen them in recordings, but witnessing their approach in person made her blood freeze. They moved with predatory grace, their multiple eyes scanning for targets while weapon appendages charged with deadly energy. "Contact in 30 seconds, Marcus announced calmly, as if he were discussing dinner plans. "Remember, we need to hold Corridor 7 for exactly 4 minutes and 20 seconds. Not 4 minutes and 19 seconds, not 4 minutes and 21 seconds. "And if we can't?" asked Dr. Veltar, who had insisted on staying despite multiple evacuation orders. Marcus checked his rifle's charge indicator. "Then we hold it for 4 minutes and 21 seconds. The human capacity for what other species called impossible optimism had been studied by xenopsychologists for decades. Most concluded it was a survival trait developed on their dangerous homeworld. But standing beside Marcus as the first void creature rounded the corner, Zarathak realized it wasn't optimism at all. It was certainty. Humans simply refused to accept that some things couldn't be done. The creature that entered their field of fire had once been part of a Zephyrian battle mech, its elegant silver frame now twisted and fused with pulsing organic matter. Multiple weapon ports along its torso began glowing with lethal energy. "Fire," Marcus said quietly. The combined plasma fire from the defenders lit up the corridor like a miniature star. The creature staggered but kept coming, its body absorbing and adapting to their weapons' frequencies with each shot. "It's adapting," Dr. Volta shouted. "They always adapt." "Good," Marcus replied. "Adaptation takes time." Rodriguez switched to kinetic rounds. Chief Rodriguez, positioned behind an improvised barricade, swapped out his energy weapon for an old-fashioned projectile gun. The rapid-fire bursts of metal slugs caught the creature by surprise, tearing through tissue that had just finished adapting to energy weapons. "Kinetic weapons are primitive," Dr. Valtar protested even as the creature fell. "They can't possibly be effective against their advanced armor." "That's the point," Marcus explained, already targeting the next wave of creatures approaching. "They've consumed hundreds of advanced species. They know how to counter energy shields, plasma weapons, quantum disruptors. But sometimes the old ways work because they're too simple to counter." More creatures poured into the corridor, and the defenders opened fire. But Zarathark noticed something strange happening. Instead of the overwhelming despair she'd expected, instead of the hopeless last stand that should have been taking place, the human crew members were actually coordinating more effectively as the pressure increased. Lieutenant Holkins had somehow managed to jury-rig the station's internal sensors to track void creature movements through the walls. Chief Rodriguez was calling out target priorities with machine-like precision. Even Marcus, faced with impossible odds and certain death, was becoming more focused and efficient with each passing second. "This is impossible," she murmured, watching Marcus calmly reload his weapon while creatures that had consumed entire star systems charged toward their position. "You should all be paralyzed with fear." "Fear's useful," Marcus replied, dropping 2 creatures with precise headshots. "Keeps you alert. But panic's just fear without a plan, and we've always got a plan." "What's the plan here exactly?" Zarathark demanded, her own weapon adding to the defensive fire. "Buy time for the Defiant to get in position," Marcus answered. 3 minutes, 40 seconds to go. The creatures kept coming, and their bodies began forming protective barriers from the fallen. Worse, they were learning from each encounter, moving in patterns that made them harder to hit. But instead of despair, Zarathark heard something that shocked her to her core. Rodriguez was humming. "Chief," she called out. "Are you actually enjoying this?" "Not enjoying exactly," Rodriguez replied, switching to explosive rounds as the creatures formed a shield wall. "But this is what we trained for. This is why humans joined the Galactic Council in the first place. To die in hopeless battles? To make sure hopeless battles aren't actually hopeless," Marcus corrected, directing covering fire as Dr. Velta relocated to a safer position. 2 minutes, 50 seconds. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of something that made even the battle-hardened humans pause. A massive creature, easily 3 times larger than the others, flowed into the corridor like liquid metal given malevolent life. Its form shifted constantly, incorporating features from dozens of different species. Zarathark recognized elements of Kytherian armor plating, Andromedan energy cores, and what looked like human neural processors. "It's wearing us," Dr. Veltar whispered in horror. "The swarm consumed representatives from our species and built that thing from their remains." "Disgusting," Marcus agreed matter-of-factly. "Rodriguez, high explosives. Holkins, see if you can overload that energy core. Commander Zarathark, I need you to keep the smaller ones off our backs while we deal with the big ugly." The creature spoke then, its voice a harmonious blend of every species it had consumed. "Humans, you fight without hope. You struggle without purpose. Surrender, and your consumption will be swift." Marcus actually laughed. "You know what your problem is? You've been consuming species that fight to survive. Humans fight to win. There's a difference. You cannot win. We have consumed 1,000 worlds. We have absorbed the knowledge and strength of 1,000,000 species. And yet," Marcus said, taking careful aim, "you still don't understand the one thing that makes humans dangerous. What is that?" Marcus smiled. "We don't know when to quit." The battle that followed was unlike anything Zarathark had ever witnessed. The massive creature unleashed weapon systems from dozens of different species, filling the corridor with energy beams, projectiles, and exotic matter that should have killed them all instantly. But the humans didn't fight like any species Zarathark had ever seen. They didn't retreat when overwhelmed. They didn't calculate odds and surrender when defeat seemed certain. Instead, they adapted in real time, using their enemy's strength against them. When the creature fired Catherian plasma beams, Rodriguez used the energy discharge to mask his approach and plant explosive charges. When it deployed Andromedan shield generators, Hawkins hacked the frequency and turned them into weapons that consumed the creature's own energy reserves. And Marcus, Impossible Marcus, walked directly into the creature's attack range and began a conversation. "You know what you remind me of?" he asked conversationally, dodging energy beams with casual grace. "My old drill sergeant, big scary. Thought he knew everything because he'd been around longer than anyone else." "You dare mock us?" the creature roared, its attacks becoming more frenzied. "Not mocking, just pointing out a tactical error." Marcus gestured to the corridor around them. "You're so focused on showing us how powerful you are, how much you've consumed, how hopeless our situation is, that you forgot something important." "What?" Marcus checked his chronometer. 30 seconds. The creature paused, confusion rippling across its constantly shifting features. 30 seconds until what? Until you realize that humans don't fight battles to win battles. We fight battles to win wars. 29 seconds later, the UES Defiance main weapons array, precisely targeted using the sensor data Hawkins had been transmitting throughout the fight, punched through Kepler Station's hull exactly where Dr. Veltar's calculations had predicted the creature would be standing. The beam didn't just destroy the creature. It punched through 17 more levels of the station, through the approaching Void Fleet's formation, and detonated the stolen Andromedan energy cores that Marcus had identified in their vessel's power systems. The chain reaction consumed half the Void Fleet in a matter of seconds. As alarms wailed and the station's remaining structure groaned under the stress of the massive breach, Marcus calmly helped Dr. Veltar to his feet and checked his chronometer again. 4 minutes and 20 seconds, exactly, he announced with satisfaction. "I love it when a plan comes together." Zarathak stared at the human captain with something approaching awe. "You planned this entire battle just to position that creature for a single shot?" "Well, that and buying time for the evacuation ships to reach the Arcturus defense line," Marcus admitted. "But mostly the single shot thing, yes." Through the breach in the station's hull, they could see the remaining Void ships retreating, apparently reconsidering their approach now that half their fleet had been destroyed by what they'd assumed would be easy prey. As rescue ships from the surviving human vessels began docking with the station, Zarathak finally understood what made humans so dangerous. It wasn't their technology, or their numbers, or their individual strength. It was their absolute refusal to accept that their friends had to die. When faced with impossible odds, other species calculated their chances of survival. Humans calculated how many of their enemies they could take with them, and then figured out how to take just one more. "Commander," Marcus said, offering her a hand up as structural damage made walking difficult. "I should probably mention, this was just the opening move. The real battle starts when we reach the Arcturus defense line." Zarathak accepted his assistance and found herself actually looking forward to what came next. "What makes you think we can hold the line there any better than we did here?" Marcus grinned, and Zarathak finally understood why that expression made other species nervous. "Because at Arcturus, we won't just have 3 human ships, we'll have 12. And I've been told that when humans really get organized, we become downright unreasonable." As they boarded the rescue shuttle, Zarathaka caught herself hoping that the Void Swarm was prepared for unreasonable, because she was beginning to suspect that reasonable had just left the building, and what remained was something the galaxy had never seen before. Humans with a plan, allies to protect, and absolutely nothing left to lose. Admiral Kethmore had commanded the Arcturus defense line for 8 years, overseeing the most heavily fortified position in known space. His species, the Hegemony, had built their reputation on mathematical precision and strategic patience. They calculated every angle, planned for every contingency, and never engaged in battle without overwhelming superiority. Which was why the current tactical briefing was giving him a headache. "Let me understand this correctly," Admiral Kethmore said, his elongated skull plate shifting in what humans had learned indicated deep concentration. "The Void Swarm is approaching with approximately 8,000 vessels. We have 600 ships from 7 different species, and Captain Chen's proposal is to attack them." "That's correct," Marcus replied from the holographic display. He was aboard the UES Defiant, which had somehow managed to survive its encounter at Kepler Station and was now leading the evacuation convoy toward Arcturus. "Aggressive defense is our best option." "Captain, perhaps you misunderstand the meaning of the word defense," interjected General Korath of the Draconian Empire. His reptilian features radiated skepticism. Defense typically involves building barriers and waiting for the enemy to exhaust themselves against your fortifications. That strategy works against normal enemies, Marcus agreed. But the Void Swarm gets stronger every time they consume something. Every ship they destroy, every planet they absorb, adds to their collective power. If we wait for them to come to us, they'll arrive with the technological capabilities of every species they've consumed between here and Kepler. And your solution is to reduce our defensive advantages by attacking them in open space? Admiral Kethmore's tone suggested this was the most illogical thing he'd heard in his 300-year career. Exactly. Dr. Velta, who had been unusually quiet since the evacuation, cleared his throat. Admiral, I've been analyzing the battle at Kepler Station. Captain Chen's tactical approach was unconventional. Unconventional how? He treated the battle as a mathematics problem, but not the kind we're familiar with. Instead of calculating survival probabilities, he calculated maximum impact variables. Admiral Kethmore's skull plates shifted again. Explain. Human military doctrine apparently doesn't focus on minimizing their own casualties. They focus on maximizing their strategic effect, even if it means accepting higher risks to their own forces. General Korath leaned forward, his golden eyes reflecting confusion. That makes no logical sense. The primary objective of any military force is to preserve itself so it can continue fighting. Unless, Captain Sarah Liu interjected from the UES defiant, your primary objective isn't to continue fighting. Sometimes your objective is to make sure the fight ends in your favor, regardless of what it costs you personally. The command center fell silent as the implications of that statement sank in. Admiral Kethmore had studied hundreds of species military doctrines, and every single one prioritized force preservation as a core strategic principle. The idea of deliberately accepting higher casualties to achieve strategic objectives was not just unusual, it was almost incomprehensible.
Captain Chen, Admiral Kethmore said carefully, are you suggesting that human forces would knowingly engage in suicide tactics?
Not suicide, Marcus replied.
Sacrifice.
There's a difference. Suicide is throwing your life away for nothing. Sacrifice is trading your life for something more important than your life. Such as making sure your friends survive, Captain Liu answered. Such as ensuring the species you've sworn to protect have a future. Such as proving that extinction isn't inevitable just because it seems unstoppable. Dr. Velta brought up tactical displays showing the approaching Void Fleet. The swarm has been monitoring our communications. They expect us to establish defensive positions and wait for them to probe our weaknesses. Which is exactly what we should do, General Korath insisted. Arcturus has the most advanced shield generators in the galaxy, orbital weapons platforms that can destroy entire fleets, and natural gravitational barriers that force enemy ships into predictable approach vectors. All of which the Void Swarm has encountered before, Marcus pointed out. They've consumed species with similar defensive capabilities. They know how to break sieges. But do they know how to handle humans who refuse to be sieged? Captain Liu asked. Admiral Kethmore studied the tactical displays with growing unease. The human proposal was madness. They wanted to take the 12 human vessels, 12 ships, against 8,000 and use them as the spearhead of an offensive strike against the Void Fleet while it was still in deep space. The plan violated every principle of sound military strategy. It abandoned their defensive advantages, split their forces, and relied on the enemy making tactical errors that no intelligence reports suggested they were prone to making. It was also, Admiral Kethmore was beginning to realize, probably going to work. Commander Zorathaki, he said, turning to the Kytherian officer who had survived Kepler Station. You fought alongside humans. What is your assessment? Zarathak's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Admiral, I've studied warfare for 2 centuries. I've commanded fleets in 3 galactic conflicts. I understand logistics, strategic planning, and tactical mathematics better than most species understand their own languages. She paused, her forearms gesturing toward the human ships on the tactical display. Everything I know about warfare says Captain Chen's plan should result in the complete annihilation of the human fleet within the first 10 minutes of engagement. And yet, I've seen what happens when humans decide that mathematical impossibility isn't a good enough reason to stop fighting. At Kepler Station, they turned a hopeless last stand into a strategic victory that cost the Void Swarm half their fleet. The humans got lucky, General Korath protested. No, Zorathak replied firmly. The humans made their own luck. They created opportunities where none should have existed, and then they exploited those opportunities with a precision that no species should possess under combat stress. Admiral Kethmore accessed his personal files and reviewed everything the Galactic Council knew about human military history. The records painted a picture of a species that had spent most of its existence fighting itself, developing tactical innovations through constant warfare, and consistently achieving victory against superior forces through sheer bloody-minded determination. "Captain Chen," he said finally, "your species has been part of the Galactic Council for 50 years. In that time, you've participated in exactly 3 minor conflicts and 1 humanitarian crisis. Your military experience against advanced alien technology is minimal." "True," Marcus admitted. "Your ships are primitive compared to most Council vessels. Your weapons technology is decades behind current standards. Your crew members have lifespans shorter than most species' military training periods." "Also true. So why?" Admiral Kethmore asked. "Do I find myself believing that your plan might actually succeed?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made every officer in the command center listen carefully. "Admiral, every species in this galaxy has fought for territory, resources, or dominance. You fight to preserve your civilizations and maintain your way of life. Those are noble goals, and they've created great warriors and brilliant strategists." He gestured toward the approaching Void fleet. "But humans fight for something different. We fight for the idea that tomorrow should be better than today. We fight for the belief that no problem is so big that it can't be solved if enough people work together. And we fight for the simple principle that nobody gets left behind." "Philosophy doesn't stop energy weapons," General Korath pointed out. "No," Captain Liu agreed. "But it does something more important. It makes you willing to stand up and fight when energy weapons are pointed at you." Dr. Veltar had been running calculations throughout the conversation. Now he looked up with an expression of amazement. "I've been analyzing human tactical patterns from their own historical records," he announced. "Their military doctrine doesn't just accept casualties as necessary. It actually incorporates the psychological effect of sacrifice as a strategic weapon." "Explain," Admiral Kethmore ordered. "When humans take casualties in defense of allies, it doesn't demoralize their forces. It enrages them. Each loss makes the survivors fight harder, take greater risks, and attempt more ambitious objectives. It's a positive feedback loop that transforms defeats into strategic advantages. That's impossible. Casualties should weaken military effectiveness." "It should," Dr. Veltar agreed. "But human psychology apparently doesn't follow standard patterns. They've evolved a pack-bonding instinct so strong that losing members of their group triggers enhanced combat performance rather than tactical retreat." Admiral Kethmore stared at the human ships on his tactical display. 12 vessels crewed by a species that became more dangerous when they started dying, led by officers who measured victory not by survival rates but by the safety of their allies. The Void Swarm had consumed 1,000 species, absorbed the military knowledge of countless civilizations, and adapted to every tactical approach they'd encountered. But they had never encountered anything like humans. "Very well," Admiral Kethmore announced. "Captain Chen, you have authorization to proceed with your offensive operation. The rest of the fleet will provide support as outlined in your tactical briefing."
"Understood, Admiral. One more thing."
"Yes?" Marcus smiled, and Admiral Kethmore finally understood why that expression made other species nervous. "When this is over, when we've stopped the Void Swarm and saved the galaxy, I want everyone to remember something important." "What's that?" "We didn't win because humans are stronger or smarter or more advanced than anyone else. We won because when extinction came knocking at the galaxy's door, humanity said, 'Not today,' and meant it." As the human ships began moving toward their attack positions, Admiral Kethmore found himself looking forward to the battle with something approaching anticipation. The mathematics said they should lose. Logic said they would all die. But mathematics and logic had never met human stubbornness before. And Admiral Kethmore was beginning to suspect that the universe was about to learn why that was a very dangerous combination. The human attack fleet moved through space with a precision that defied their ship's primitive appearance. 12 vessels against 8,000, heading directly toward the largest concentration of hostile forces the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Kethmore watched from the Arcturus defense line as the human formation spread out into what appeared to be a completely random pattern. "Admiral," reported his tactical officer, "the human ships are not following any recognized attack formation. Their positioning appears chaotic." "It's not chaotic, Dr. Colum," Veltar said quietly, studying the movement patterns with growing amazement. "It's adaptive. They're not using predetermined formations because they don't know what they're going to encounter. Then, how can they coordinate their attack? They're not planning to coordinate their attack, Commander Sarathak realized. They're planning to improvise it. On the main display, Captain Marcus Chen's voice came through clearly despite the vast distance. This is defiant to all human vessels. Remember, we're not trying to destroy their entire fleet. We just need to convince them that attacking Arcturus is going to cost more than they're willing to pay. How exactly do 12 ships convince 8,000 that retreat is the better option? Asked General Korath. His question was answered when the first wave of void vessels came within weapons range. The human ships didn't open fire. Instead, they did something that violated every tactical manual in known space. They accelerated directly toward the enemy fleet, passing through the void formation without engaging, and continued toward the rear guard where the largest and most heavily armed vessels were positioned. They're ignoring the front line entirely, Admiral Kethmore's tactical officer reported in disbelief. They're heading straight for the command ships. Suicide run, General Korath muttered. I respect their courage, but this will accomplish nothing except getting them all killed. But as the human ships reached the rear of the void formation, something extraordinary happened. Instead of launching a desperate attack, they began transmitting. This is Captain Chen to all void vessels, Marcus announced calmly. I'd like to negotiate. The response from the void fleet was immediate and overwhelming. Energy beams, projectile weapons, and exotic matter discharges converged on the human ships from every direction. The space around the 12 human vessels became a maelstrom of destructive force that should have vaporized them instantly. Instead, they began to dance. There was no other word for it. The human ships moved through the hostile fire with fluid grace, their primitive engines somehow providing maneuverability that put advanced alien technology to shame. They twisted and spun, dove and climbed, weaving between energy beams with centimeters to spare. How are they doing that? Admiral Kethmore demanded. Doctor? Velto was frantically analyzing the tactical data. Their ships are smaller and lighter than most Council vessels. What we considered primitive technology is actually providing them with superior agility, but the pilot skill required to execute those maneuvers under combat stress should be impossible. Unless, Commander Zarathak said thoughtfully, you've spent your entire evolutionary history fighting each other in gravity wells with atmospheric interference. The human vessels continued their deadly ballet, staying just ahead of the Void Fleet's weapons while Captain Chen kept talking. I understand you've consumed a lot of species, Marcus said conversationally, his ship pulling a turn that defied physics, while energy beams scorched the space where it had been milliseconds before. Impressive collection. But I notice you haven't encountered humans before. A response came from the Void Fleet, transmitted in a harmonious blend of every language they'd absorbed. Humans. Your resistance is futile. You will be consumed like all others. Maybe, Marcus agreed, his ship diving between two massive void cruisers and somehow emerging unscathed. But I should probably mention something first. What? We're not the attack. That's when the real battle began. The human ships had never been intended to destroy the Void Fleet. They had been bait, drawing the enemy's attention and weapons fire while more than 600 Allied vessels, hidden in the sensor shadows of Arcturus's asteroid field, emerged behind the Void formation. But even that wasn't the real plan. As the combined Allied fleet opened fire on the rearguard of the Void Armada, the human ships suddenly changed tactics. Instead of continuing their evasive maneuvers, they began ramming attacks against the largest Void vessels. No, Admiral Kethmore shouted, watching in horror as the UES Henderson deliberately collided with a Void battleship 3 times its size. The explosion lit up space like a newborn star. Admiral, Dr. Veltar said urgently, look at the tactical display. The humans aren't committing suicide, they're performing surgical strikes. He was right. Each human ship that sacrificed itself did so against a specific target. The command vessels that coordinated Void Fleet movements, the support ships that maintained their adaptive technology, the specialized vessels that allowed them to absorb conquered worlds. With each human ship that died, the Void Fleet became less coordinated, less adaptive, less efficient. They're cutting off the swarm's ability to function as a collective, Commander Zarathak breathed. Without central coordination, each Void ship becomes just another individual vessel. But the cost was horrific. Within minutes, 8 of the 12 human ships had been destroyed, taking their crews with them in blazes of heroic sacrifice. Only 4 human vessels remained, including Captain Chen's Defiant. All human ships, this is Arcturus Command, Admiral Kethmore transmitted desperately. Retreat immediately. You've accomplished your objective. Negative, Admiral, Captain Chen replied. His ship was badly damaged, atmosphere venting from multiple hull breaches, but his voice remained steady. We're not done yet. Captain, you've lost 2/3 of your fleet. There's nothing more you can accomplish. Actually, there is. The remaining human ships regrouped in the center of the Void Formation, surrounded by thousands of enemy vessels. They should have been annihilated instantly. Instead, something unprecedented happened. The Void ships stopped firing. Why have they ceased their attack? General Karath demanded. Dr. Velta was staring at his displays in amazement. The humans have created a tactical paradox. The Void ships can't fire on them without hitting each other. By positioning themselves in the exact center of the formation, they've turned the enemy's numbers into a disadvantage. But they're still trapped. They can't escape, and they can't win. They're not trying to escape, Commander Zarathak said quietly. They're trying to send a message. Captain Chen's voice came through the comm system one final time, broadcast on all frequencies so every species in the galaxy would hear. This is Captain Marcus Chen of the United Earth ship, defiant to all Allied forces, all neutral observers, and anyone else who might be listening. In approximately 60 seconds, my remaining crew and I are going to do something that has never been done before in the history of galactic warfare. What? Admiral Cathmore asked, though he was afraid he already knew the answer. We're going to prove that the Void Swarm can be stopped. We're going to show the galaxy that extinction is not inevitable. And we're going to do it by demonstrating the most dangerous human characteristic of all, which is... Marcus Chen smiled, and somehow that expression carried across space with perfect clarity. When humans have nothing left to lose, we become incredibly creative. The 4 remaining human ships suddenly accelerated toward each other, and Admiral Kethmore realized what they were planning to do. The humans had modified their ship's reactors to overload simultaneously, creating a chain reaction that would tear a hole in space-time itself, but not randomly. The explosion was precisely calculated to destabilize the exotic matter cores that powered the Void ship's adaptive technology. Instead of just destroying the local fleet, the detonation would create a cascade failure that would propagate through the quantum entanglement network the Void Swarm used to coordinate their forces across the galaxy. Every Void ship, everywhere, would lose the collective consciousness that made them unstoppable. They're going to kill themselves to cripple the entire swarm, Dr. Veltar whispered. The strategic implications are staggering. Captain Chen, Admiral Kethmore transmitted urgently, there has to be another way. Maybe, Marcus replied, but we don't have time to find it. And besides, this is what humans do. We see impossible problems, and we solve them the only way we know how. How is that? By proving that impossible is just another word for expensive. The explosion, when it came, was visible across 3 star systems. The 4 human ships vanished in a blast of pure energy that tore reality itself apart at the quantum level. The cascade effect spread through the Void fleet instantly, and 8,000 vessels that had operated as a perfect collective suddenly found themselves reduced to individual ships with no coordination, no shared consciousness, and no idea how to fight as anything other than a unified swarm. The Allied fleet, positioned perfectly to take advantage of the chaos, struck with devastating effectiveness. Without their collective coordination, the Void ships fell to concentrated fire in minutes rather than months. As the last Void vessel was destroyed, Admiral Kethmore found himself staring at empty space where the human ships had made their final sacrifice. 12 vessels and their crews had faced 8,000 enemies and won, not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through sheer, magnificent, insane human determination. Admiral, his communications officer reported, we're receiving reports from across the galaxy. The Void fleets everywhere have lost cohesion. They're retreating or being destroyed by local defense forces. Confirmed, Doctor. Velter added. The human sacrifice severed the quantum entanglement network that allowed the swarm to operate as a collective consciousness. They're no longer a unified threat. Admiral Kethmore nodded slowly, still processing what he had witnessed. Make a note in the official records. The Void Swarm threat has been neutralized through the direct action of human forces under the command of Captain Marcus Chen. What about the other human personnel who participated in the operation? Commander Zarathak asked. Admiral Kethmore considered this carefully. List them all. Every name, every ship, every crew member who participated in this operation, and make sure the records reflect something important. What's that, Admiral? That today, 12 human ships did something that the combined might of 1,000 species couldn't accomplish. They looked extinction in the eye and told it to go find someone else to bother. As the fleet began rescue operations and damage assessment, Admiral Kethmore found himself understanding something profound about the strange species that had joined their galactic community 50 years ago. Humans didn't fight to win battles, they fought to win the war, and they were willing to pay any price to ensure their friends survived to see the victory. The Void Swarm had learned, too late, that there are some things in the universe more dangerous than extinction. One of them is a human with nothing left to lose and friends to protect. 6 months after the Battle of Arcturus, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Representatives from every member species gathered in the vast amphitheater of the council chambers. Their attention focused on a single human figure standing at the central podium. Ambassador Sarah Chen, sister of the late Captain Marcus Chen, stood before the assembled delegates with the same quiet confidence that had characterized her brother's final battle. She wore the simple blue uniform of the Human Diplomatic Corps, and in her hands, she held a datapad containing the official report on the Void Swarm conflict. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic system. "I appear before you today to present the final assessment of Operation Arcturus and to address certain proposals that have been submitted regarding humanity's role in galactic affairs." Admiral Kethmore, now serving as the Council's military coordinator, watched from the hegemony delegation with mixed feelings. The proposals Sarah Chen was referring to had sparked the most intense debate in Council history. Some species wanted to grant humanity immediate membership in the Council's governing body. Others wanted to place restrictions on human military activities, fearing the implications of their sacrificial tactics. A few had suggested that humans were too dangerous to remain part of the galactic community at all. Before we address future policies, Ambassador Chen continued, "I believe it's important to understand exactly what happened at Arcturus and why it happened." She activated the chamber's holographic display, showing tactical recordings from the final battle. The assembled delegates watched in fascination as the human fleet executed their impossible attack, their sacrificial strikes, and their ultimate victory through mutual annihilation. The human forces at Arcturus were outnumbered 667 to 1, Ambassador Chen noted. "According to every military doctrine in our databases, they should have been destroyed within minutes of engaging the enemy. Yet they achieved total victory," added Admiral Kethmore. "The question before this council is whether such tactics represent a valuable strategic asset or a dangerous precedent that threatens the stability of galactic civilization." Senator Vrextel of the Centauran Republic rose to speak. "Ambassador Chen, the Centauran Republic has grave concerns about humanity's military philosophy. Your species appears to treat mass casualties as an acceptable outcome, even when alternative strategies might preserve more lives." "Senator," Sarah replied carefully, "I think there may be a misunderstanding about human military philosophy. We don't accept casualties because we don't value life. We accept casualties because we value some things more than life."
Such as ensuring that our friends survive to see tomorrow. Such as protecting species who cannot protect themselves.
Such as proving that extinction is not inevitable just because it seems unstoppable. Commander Zarathak, now serving as liaison between the Cytherian military and the Council, stood to address the chamber. "Honored delegates, I was present at both Kepler Station and Arcturus. I fought alongside human forces in both engagements. If I may, I would like to share some observations." The chamber fell silent. Zarathak's combat record and tactical expertise were respected throughout the galaxy. "In my 2 centuries of military service," she began, "I have fought alongside warriors from dozens of species. I have witnessed acts of courage, tactical brilliance, and strategic innovation that defied belief, but I have never witnessed anything like human combat doctrine." She gestured toward the tactical displays still showing the Battle of Arcturus. "Every species in this chamber fights to preserve something, their territory, their resources, their way of life. These are rational objectives, and they produce rational military strategies focused on minimizing losses while achieving specific goals." She paused, her mandibles clicking thoughtfully. "Humans fight to preserve an idea. The idea that tomorrow can be better than today. The idea that no problem is unsolvable if enough people work together. The idea that nobody deserves to face extinction alone. Ideas don't stop energy weapons," protested General Karath. "No," Zarathak agreed. "But they do something more important. They make you willing to step in front of energy weapons when they're aimed at someone else." Dr. Veltar, now the Council's chief xenopsychologist, approached the podium with his latest research data. "Honored delegates, I've spent the past 6 months studying human psychology and military history. My findings may help explain what we witnessed at Arcturus." He activated a new series of displays showing comparative analysis between human and alien psychological profiles. Most species develop military doctrines based on self-preservation instincts. The primary objective is to eliminate threats while minimizing risk to one's own forces. This creates predictable tactical patterns focused on overwhelming superiority and force preservation. And humans? Humans developed military doctrines based on pack bonding instincts. Their primary objective is to protect the group, even if it means accepting higher individual risk. This creates unpredictable tactical patterns focused on maximum strategic impact regardless of cost. Senator Vrexdahl looked skeptical. Dr. Veltar, are you suggesting that humans are inherently more altruistic than other species? Not exactly. I'm suggesting that humans define self differently than most species. When a human says, "I will protect you," they mean it literally. Your survival becomes as important to them as their own survival, sometimes more so. Ambassador Chen stepped forward again. Delegates, I understand your concerns about human military doctrine, but I want to address something more fundamental. The question of what humanity's membership in this council means for all of us. She gestured toward the tactical displays, showing not the battle itself but the aftermath. Worlds that had been saved from the void swarm. Species that had survived extinction, civilizations that were rebuilding because 12 human ships had decided that impossible was just another word for expensive. 50 years ago, humanity joined this council as the newest and least advanced member species. We brought primitive technology, limited resources, and no significant military power. What we did bring was a simple philosophy, that every species, no matter how small or weak or different, deserved the right to exist and thrive. A noble philosophy, admitted Chancellor Morden of the Andromedan Collective, but one that many species have held throughout history. True, Sarah acknowledged, but most species abandon that philosophy when the cost of maintaining it becomes too high. Humans have a tendency to double down instead. Admiral Kethmore rose to address the chamber. Delegates, I have reviewed the tactical records from Arcturus in detail. I have also studied human military history from their pre-spaceflight era. I believe Ambassador Chen is correct. Humans do not abandon their principles when maintaining them becomes difficult. They find ways to make the difficult become possible, even when it costs them everything, added Commander Zara Tak. Especially when it costs them everything. The chamber buzzed with conversation as delegates discussed the implications. Finally, High Counselor Tethran of the Elder Assembly called for order. Ambassador Chen, this council must make a decision regarding humanity's future role in galactic affairs. Some members believe that human tactical doctrines are too unpredictable and dangerous to be given unrestricted authority. Others believe that human sacrifice at Arcturus has earned your species a position of leadership in council affairs. What does humanity want? Asked Senator Vrextal. Sarah Chen smiled, and every delegate in the chamber suddenly understood why that expression made other species nervous. We want to continue doing what we've always done. We want to stand beside our friends when they're in trouble. We want to solve problems that everyone else thinks are unsolvable. And we want to make sure that when the next impossible threat comes along, nobody has to face it alone. And if that requires sacrifice, then we'll sacrifice, because that's what you do for friends. High Counselor Tethran consulted with the other senior delegates for several minutes before announcing the council's decision. By unanimous vote, this council grants humanity full membership in the Galactic Defense Authority with unlimited operational autonomy. Human forces will serve as rapid response specialists for extreme threat scenarios. The chamber erupted in applause, but Tethran raised a hand for silence. However, this appointment comes with one condition. What condition? Ambassador Chen asked. That humanity continues to do exactly what they did at Arcturus. When extinction comes knocking at the galaxy's door, we want humans to be the ones who answer. 6 months later, Admiral Zara Taka stood on the bridge of the UES Determination, one of humanity's newest warships. The vessel was named for Captain Marcus Chen's final transmission, and it served as flagship for the new Galactic Rapid Response Fleet. The fleet was responding to distress signals from the Outer Rim, where an unknown threat had been destroying colonies and research stations. Initial reports suggested another extinction-level enemy, possibly even more dangerous than the Void Swarm. Admiral, reported the Human Communications Officer, we're receiving surrender demands from the unknown hostiles. They're demanding that all species in this sector submit to absorption into their collective or face total annihilation. How original. Zarathek replied dryly. What's our response? Captain Rodriguez, now commanding the Determination after surviving the Battle of Arcturus, smiled with characteristic human confidence. Same as always, Admiral. We tell them that extinction will have to find someone else to bother because this neighborhood is under human protection. And if they refuse to listen, then we teach them why every species in the galaxy considers it an honor to stand beside humanity in battle. Zarathak settled into her command chair, feeling the familiar mixture of anticipation and confidence that came with fighting alongside humans. The unknown enemy might be stronger, more advanced, or more numerous than anything they had faced before. But they had made one critical error in their calculations. They had threatened humanity's friends. And throughout the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds and 1,000,000 ships, that simple fact had just made them everyone else's problem. Because when you stood beside humanity in battle, you learned that impossible was just another word for expensive. Extinction was just another enemy to defeat. And hope was the most dangerous weapon in the universe. The determination and its fleet accelerated toward the unknown threat, and Zarafak found herself looking forward to the battle. After all, she was about to fight alongside humans. And if there was one thing the galaxy had learned, it was that humans always found a way to win. Even when winning should have been impossible. Especially when winning should have been impossible. Because that's what humans did. They turned impossible into inevitable, and they did it with a smile that made extinction itself nervous. The honor of standing beside them in that fight was, indeed, the greatest privilege the galaxy could offer.